Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. Today, my guest is former FBI Special Agent Ken Gray, who worked several years in counterterrorism. And today we'll talk about the shooting in DC. That is a crime event that happened just a few days ago when a guy from Chicago by the name of Elias Rodriguez shot two Israeli embassy employees just out of the embassy and very close to the Jewish History Museum. Thanks for your time, Ken. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Ken, before we start, would you like to tell my viewers something about you, your background, and whatever you feel is relevant for this discussion that we're going to have?
Sure. So I'm a former FBI special agent. I spent 24 years with the Bureau, working primarily matters of counterterrorism, but also have experience doing cyber investigations, counterproliferation investigations, and surveillance. But really, my interest lies in counterterrorism matters.
So, was this, in your opinion, a terrorist attack or a hate crime or kind of both? Because what we have to keep in mind here is that this Rodriguez guy shot the two Israeli embassy employees from quite far. And then when they were lying on the ground, he got closer and he shot them again multiple times. So the witnesses say. Is it terrorism? Is it a hate crime? Is it both?
So in reality, it could be charged either way. The thing is that that he carried out the shooting in support of Gaza, in support of Free Palestine, and so it meets the definition of terrorism. Terrorism is the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the people, or any segment thereof, in furtherance of a political or social objective. He did this because of his support for a free Palestine, for Gaza. And so it meets the definition of terrorism. But at the same time, hate crime is a crime plus a bias. And the bias in this case would be his hatred of Israelis because of their actions in the Gaza Strip. So it could be prosecuted either way. Often you have these terrorism acts that are prosecuted as hate crimes because it's felt that it's too difficult to present the case as a terrorism act to a jury. And so it could be either one, but yet prosecuted as a hate crime because it's easier to do a hate crime than a terrorism crime.
So when I woke up on Thursday morning last week and I heard about this on the news, I first heard about the shooting. So I expected the news to go on, such as the guy is on the run and there's a big manhunt has happened for Luigi Mangione or for the Tsarnaev brothers who conducted the Boston bombing in 2013. Nothing of that happened because this guy entered the museum, just sat down and waited for the police to come over, and then he turned himself into to the police. And when he was arrested, as you mentioned, he was screaming, "Free Gaza, free Palestine! I did it for Gaza, I did it for Palestine." How come he didn't even try to escape and to run?
So if this was just about killing Jews, he could have done that in Chicago. Instead, he chose to fly from Chicago to Washington, D.C. He checked his gun in his checked baggage, got to D.C. there, went and bought tickets to the museum, and then stood outside the museum waiting for people to come out of the Capitol Jewish Museum, waiting for people to come out of there. And then once he had these four individuals standing there at the crosswalk, he crossed the crosswalk, went through them, turned around and started shooting at them. And he killed Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Milgram, Sarah Milgram.
Yeah. And she actually, he reloaded and continued firing on Sarah until they were both dead. He then dropped his gun in his backpack, went inside the museum, and waited for the police. So he wanted it known that he was there to shoot Jews, and he wanted it known that he was there to shoot Jews because of Palestine, because of Gaza. And so that was the part that showed that this was politically motivated, or that that he wanted it known that this was not just an act against because he was motivated with a bias against Jews, but he was doing this for a specific political purpose and wanted it known that that political purpose was because of Gaza.
But did it pick random people, in your opinion? Because,
Uh,
I mean, no, go ahead.
he did not know the individuals that he shot. He was outside this museum. This museum was holding an event for young professionals who were attached to different embassies in the area. So he could have been shooting Italians. He could have been shooting Dutch. He didn't know these individuals. So it's not like he specifically picked Yaron and Sarah. Instead, he was picking two people coming out of the museum at closing time that he thought was associated with it. But he lucked out that one of the two was actually a Israeli diplomat. Yaron worked for the embassy as a diplomatic. Sarah was an employee there, but was an American citizen. And so he lucked out in getting the right people, but he was there to send a message. He wanted to say that this was against Israel for their actions in Gaza.
Well, we're facing now, and correct me if I'm wrong, a new generation of homegrown terrorists. And I think that the same already happened in France and in Belgium, and we're probably sooner or later going to face the same thing in Italy, because this guy is not from the Middle East. It's not from Afghanistan, Pakistan, or North Africa. This person is from Chicago.
Yeah.
So he's probably born, raised, and radicalized in the United States. Is it shifting the paradigm?
So we have a new terminology that we use as far as terrorism goes here, and that's homegrown violent extremists. And a homegrown violent extremists are individuals who, of any citizenship, who have lived in or operated primarily in the United States or its territories, who advocates or are engaged in or preparing to engage in ideologically motivated acts of terrorism activities in furtherance of a political or social objective. So that's what he is as a homegrown violent extremist. In addition to him, if you look back at New Year's Eve here down in New Orleans, the person that was involved in that act of terrorism was also a homegrown extremist. That is, he was carrying out that act and he was doing that in support of ISIS. And so we're seeing more and more people who are connected to the goal of terrorist groups for Elias Rodriguez is in support of Hamas or at least those who are supporting Gaza. And in the case of New Orleans, it was in support of ISIS. But, these are people who are not part of the organization. They haven't traveled to Syria. They haven't traveled to Gaza. They have not received training. They have not received financial support. They haven't received equipment. They are doing the act on their own. Here in the U.S., when the Sarnoff brothers planted the bombs at the Boston Marathon, neither one of them were acting at the direction of the terrorist group in one of the former Soviet republics. They were not doing that at their direction, but they were doing it in support of them. And so you see this rise of homegrown violent extremists going on, at least here in the United States, it's considered to be the primary threat.
But this has nothing to do with Tim McVeigh or the Oklahoma City bombing or that kind of extremism. We also had the shooting in El Paso or in other areas in recent years where it was a far right extremist doing that. This is totally different, right?
Yeah, this is totally different. This is the difference is that with the right-wing extremists, they are doing it for their own purposes, that there's no connection to a foreign terrorist organization. That's a good point that you raise, is that these homegrown violent extremists are doing it in support of a foreign terrorist organization. ISIS, Al Qaeda, the Iranian IRGC, the Houthis, any of those. So for a homegrown violent extremist to be a homegrown violent extremist, they are doing an act of terrorism in support of a foreign terrorist organization.
So let me ask you to break it down a little bit because you said that this guy was doing this because of his support to Palestine. That's understood. But we switched from early 2000s when we had the Al Qaeda model that says, come and train with us in Afghanistan. Then we shifted to the ISIS model that says, you don't have to come and train with us. We'll just recruit you via the internet, via Telegram, Facebook, or whatever. In this case, do you think this guy had connections to some groups in the Middle East, or was he just a lone wolf doing things by himself?
That's why they put the I in FBI. They need to do the investigation to make that determination. So you notice that after the shooting, the FBI got a search warrant and raided his home to look through his home to see what was on his computer, what books he had, whether or not there was any indication that he was actively engaged with communications with anybody in Gaza, anybody on the Hamas side of the aisle, to see if there was any direction coming from Hamas or direction coming from Iran to help him in planning and carrying out this attack.
Okay, so this is what we actually expect from the raid of his house in Chicago to see if he had connections with other people abroad. We still don't know. Bottom line is we still don't know.
Yeah, and it takes time to go through his computer to be able to do a forensic examination of that computer to see what documents are on there, what communications are on there. That takes time. And then it takes even more time for that information to be made available to the public from law enforcement. So I would not be surprised if it takes weeks to months before we see any results from that.
So I was going to ask you something for which we already have an answer. Do you think my original question would have been, do you think we're going to see appreciation on social media for what he did, as happened with the Luigi Mangione case? But unfortunately, I've already seen appreciation on X, which is the social media formerly known as Twitter, or others. What's going on in this guy's minds, the one who actually shows support for killers? I mean, this Elijah Rodriguez is a killer. He's a terrorist. He did nothing good. He did pure evil. How come people show appreciation for what he did?
Yeah. Across the United States here, we have seen people supporting Gaza on college campuses. They are being coordinated by people who have connection to Hamas. And yet there is a lot of support for that across the United States, across college campuses. Well, that is the members of the left have chosen a side. They are supporting Hamas and they are supporting Gaza. And so the support for any action, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, that's where this seems to come down to is the fact that Elias Rodriguez's despicable act of murdering these two innocent individuals standing out there on the street corner is being supported by people who are opposed to Israel's actions in Gaza. And so, it causes people to support very dastardly deeds like this.
So, how serious is anti-Semitism in the United States right now? Because this is an act of anti-Semitism, isn't it?
Yes, it is an act of anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism, the threat of acts of anti-Semitism seems to have changed here in the U.S. And that before you would have linked the actions of anti-Semitism to right-wing extremists.
Yeah.
This seems to have leaped over to left-wing extremists. That is, the left wing has chosen the side of being in support of Hamas against Israel. The Israel and Jews here in the United States, for the most part, were of the left, and yet they seem themselves being targeted by these groups. And so I think there is very much confusion on the side of which side to support here.
Yeah, I think that the same thing is happening here in Italy. It's very, but I think that here it's even, I mean, simpler because just people just hate whoever is different. So the Jews are a very good, are a very good prey because they're different from anybody else. At least in Italy, we have few Jews, of course. But what I don't understand is we have a war in Middle East that is Hamas versus Israel. Bottom line, okay, I'm very simplistic here. How come we don't see the same hate towards the Muslims? I mean, I don't want to encourage anybody, of course, okay, but I just want to understand why are the Jews so special in being targets of hate?
Well, the Arab world in general has been opposed to the existence of Israel since its inception in 1947. They saw Arabs who were living in that area being displaced by Jews who had been promised that area under the Balfour Treaty. And after World War II, this influx of Jews into the area, which had been limited to 2,000 a year, I think, by the Brits who were controlling the area at the time. And so, with the displacement of Arabs from the area there and this new state that grew up there, it was attacked almost immediately after declaring statehood by Egypt, by the surrounding countries in the area there, and the Israelis won in that war. And so there has been since the very creation of Israel as a new country, there has been hatred on the part of the Arabs in the area. It was only when Egypt decided to offer an olive branch to Israel by trying to normalize relationships between the two that you saw the breakdown in this constant conflict going on in the area. And as part of the peace process there that had been started in the area, you had seen more and more countries starting to recognize Israel in the area. Um, this is opposed by Iran, and Iran has the series of proxies all across the area. It had proxies in Syria, it had proxies in Iraq, it had the Hezbollah there in Jordan, it had the Houthis, and it was backing Hamas also. And now you've seen Iran starting to lose control of a number of those proxies. Hamas has been pretty much decimated there in Gaza. Hezbollah, with that beeper attack, has been decimated there, and so you saw with the fall of Assad's government there, you've seen the loss of the control of Syria, and so with all of that in mind, you're seeing the crumbling of this axis of evil that being controlled by Iran against Israel. And so the reason you don't see a hatred against the Arabs in the area is that they are the majority of the population in that area.
Well, how do you think it will be easy to build a case against Elijah Rodriguez? I mean, I think everything is very clear because we have witnesses. He turned himself to the police and he admitted himself doing that. So, how do you think the prosecutors will act?
Yeah, it should be a pretty much a slam dunk case in that, as you say, you have him confessing, you have eyewitnesses, you have the forensic evidence there. I'm sure that there is probably video in the area, at least of him yelling "Free Palestine," but there may also be street cameras that may have actually captured this shooting. You have him traveling to the area. He checked his gun and bag, so there's documentation of that. And I'm sure that once they process his computer, they're going to find documents supporting this also. So the charges against him are pretty much the elements of the crime are pretty much supported by the evidence. And so it should be a relatively easy case from that aspect. So I imagine that this will go relatively quickly.
Well, let me ask you something that's just coming to my mind right now. How reliable are eyewitnesses' account in cases like this? Because the police arrived within a few minutes, so they didn't have the time, like, to separate the eyewitnesses to make sure they don't talk to each other. But a person seeing someone shooting passengers can also be in shock, so have false recollections. How does that work usually?
So you are right that eyewitness identification sometimes is not reliable, but in this particular case, he stayed in the area and he went into the museum. In fact, the people in the museum thought he may have been a victim of the crime there and were treating him as if he was not the shooter, but instead as a victim. If they had seen him do the shooting, they would not have treated him that way. And so there may have been others in the area. There were four people that Rodriguez went through and turned and shot two of them. So those two others are likely to be eyewitnesses.
Okay, Ken, many thanks for your very precious explanations. I think that this case will stay in the news forever, and we will talk about it for many years, as happened in other anti-Semitism case in Italy and everywhere else. Because as we mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, this is terrorism. This is not just a murder case. So I think that you gave a very precious explanation by breaking down all the details of this case.
Anytime.
Thanks again for watching this and see you all in my next episode. Bye bye.